Welcome to Threads of Truth, where real-life mysteries meet internet speculation. Today, we're embarking on an exploration into the strange case of the Yuba County Five, a deeply unsettling story, often called America's own Dyatlov Pass mystery.
It really is one of those cases that just sticks with you.
Absolutely. Imagine, if you will, a bitterly cold California night back in 1978. You've got five friends, they're just happy coming home from a basketball game.
Yeah, a normal night out.
Exactly. And they make a turn. But instead of leading them home to their beds, it leads them into, well, one of the most baffling disappearances in American history.
It's a scenario that seems to defy all logic.
Yeah.
Just completely.
It leaves behind this trail of unanswered questions that, have puzzled investigators, amateur sleuths, everyone for decades now. This isn't just a story of getting lost. It's more like a chilling case study in how human survival instincts can seemingly just vanish.
Or be overridden by something else.
Right, leaving behind this trail of inexplicable choices that really defy logic, almost as if, I don't know, some unseen force was at play.
And what's truly compelling about this case, I think, is not just the act of vanishing itself, but the profound paradox of their behavior, under these extreme unknown pressures.
Exactly.
Think about it. What could possibly compel a group of young men friends to abandon a perfectly functional car in the dead of winter, deep in a remote mountain forest?
Yeah, with gas in the tank.
Right. Only to be found months later in the most inexplicable circumstances. I mean, some of them perished mere yards from shelter and sustenance that they hadn't even touched.
It's unbelievable.
It just challenges our very understanding of common sense, of survival instincts. What might seem like a tragic accident into this profound puzzle.
That immediately sets a haunting tone for what we're about to uncover. So let's set the scene properly. We're talking about Yuba City, California. It's February 1978.
A different time.
Definitely a different era. Instant communication wasn't just common. It barely existed for most people, certainly not out in the wilderness.
No smartphones, no easy way to call for help.
Exactly. You couldn't just pull out a phone and call for help from some remote mountain road. It truly was a time when these vast wilderness areas could become, well, formidable, silent witnesses. They could swallow secrets.
Indeed. And that year, 1978, it provides crucial context. If you found yourself off the beaten path, like these men clearly did, you were genuinely isolated.
Totally cut off.
Yeah. No GPS tracking, no cell phone signal to send out a distress call, no immediate way for help to even pinpoint your location. Search efforts back then relied on, word of mouth, traditional ground searches.
Boots on the ground.
Boots on the ground, and honestly, a significant amount of luck. This isolation, it really amplified the mystery. It meant the timeline of events, what the men did, it all had to be pieced together from very limited, often confusing evidence.
Which leaves so much room for speculation.
Precisely. It allows for all these different threads of speculation to emerge, trying to fill in those gaps.
So let's introduce the core of this mystery. The five men themselves, they're often just referred to as the Yuba County Five.
We have Ted Weher, he was 32. Jack Madruga, 30, and he was the driver that night. It was his car. Bill Sterling, 29. Jack Hewitt, who was 24. And Gary Mathias, 25. He was a Vietnam veteran and had a known history of schizophrenia.
Right. That comes up in some theories later.
It does. Now, these weren't just casual acquaintances. The sources really highlight them as a remarkably close-knit group of friends.
Very close.
They shared this common bond. They played together on a basketball team, one specifically organized for individuals with disabilities. Their camaraderie, it seems, was a really defining aspect of their lives.
And that closeness is a vital detail, I think. They all live near each other in Yuba City, which is, a relatively small agricultural community.
Right.
They spent a lot of time together, supported each other. Their routine activities often revolved around this group dynamic. What the sources also subtly underscore, and it's important, I think, to approach this with sensitivity,
Absolutely,
is that all of them had mild intellectual disabilities, or in Mathias's case, diagnosed mental health conditions.
Now, this is not, and I want to be clear, not to imply causation for what happened. That would be irresponsible.
Of course not.
But it is a piece of their collective identity that some theories, both responsibly and sometimes irresponsibly, try to factor into how they might have behaved under extreme stress.
Right. It raises questions.
It does. It raises questions about how an unexpected, maybe terrifying crisis might have been navigated by individuals who potentially processed information or reacted to fear differently than, say, someone else might. Their familiar routines provided comfort, structure, which makes their deviation from that routine even more jarring.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, okay, the evening of February 24th, 1978, their routine involved a trip.
A basketball game.
Right. They drove about 50 miles north from Yuba City up to Chico, California. They were going to watch their favorite college basketball team, the Chico State Wildcats, play a game. Just a simple, everyday kind of outing.
Something they reportedly did fairly often.
Yeah. And after the game, reports indicate they stopped at a local convenience store, Be Wise Market, I think it was called.
That's right.
They picked up some snacks and drinks,
Mm-hmm.
Soda, candy bars, milk cartons, stuff like that.
Just fueling up for the drive home.
Exactly. And that ordinary, unassuming purchase that marked the last confirmed sighting of all 5 of them together, alive, seemingly well. Everyone just assumed they were heading straight home, a journey that should have taken them directly back south to Yuba City.
And this is precisely where the ordinary just stops.
Yeah.
And the truly baffling part begins.
Yeah.
When they didn't return home by the next morning, February 25th, their families knew immediately something was terribly wrong. This wasn't like them.
They knew their routines.
Exactly. So they launched their own informal search, first, calling around friends, local hospitals, anything they could think of. When that yielded nothing, the official search kicked off pretty quickly.
And they found the car relatively fast, didn't they?
They did, within hours, actually. They located their 1969 Mercury Montego. But its discovery, well, it only deepened the mystery. It placed them not on their familiar route home at all,
Nowhere near it.
but miles away, deep in the heart of this remote and frankly treacherous wilderness area.
And this is where the details about the car itself just start to unravel any kind of conventional explanation, right?
Completely.
The vehicle was found approximately 70 miles from Chico. 70.
Yeah, a huge distance in the wrong direction.
Nestled on this remote, snow-covered mountain road deep within the Plumas National Forest. That's a significant detour from their expected path home, especially considering the treacherous winter conditions up there.
Absolutely. The road they were found on, it wasn't even plowed regularly in winter. It led up into higher elevations.
So the immediate questions for investigators must have been, how on earth did they get here? And maybe more importantly, why?
Exactly. And the condition of the vehicle itself, it just compounded those questions. It wasn't a wreck. The Montego was in surprisingly good working order.
It wasn't stuck. Because you hear snow, you think stuck.
Right. That's the first assumption. But no, contrary to those initial thoughts, authorities later were able to easily push it out by hand. It wasn't mechanically disabled. It wasn't mired in a deep snowbank.
Okay, that's weird.
It gets weirder. Crucially, it was found unlocked.
Unlocked in the middle of nowhere.
Unlocked with the windows rolled down.
Windows down in freezing weather.
In freezing temperatures. And it still had nearly a full tank of gas.
So they had fuel, they had shelter.
They had shelter, they had warmth potentially. The only thing missing, the only truly vital piece of the puzzle from the car itself, were the keys.
The keys were gone.
The keys were missing. This is such a critical point. It immediately points away from a simple breakdown or just, getting the car stuck.
Right. If it broke down, you wouldn't take the keys and leave the windows open. If it was stuck, you'd try to get it out or at least stay in it for warmth.
Precisely. Why would 5 men in a fully functional vehicle with warmth, with fuel, abandon their only means of escape and survival in such a remote, treacherous, freezing area? It just screams that something is terribly wrong, something beyond the simple navigation error or, flat tire.
It's an immediate, jarring inconsistency. It really is. Leaving a functional, warm car in a remote, snowy area during winter, it's completely counterintuitive for survival, defies all logic. So the initial search efforts after the car's discovery, they were massive, right? Involving local law enforcement, search and rescue teams, tons of volunteers.
It's a huge effort. But the conditions were impossible. The sheer depth of the snow. I mean, sources say in some places it reached over 5 feet deep.
Wow.
And the vastness of the Plumas National Forest. The terrain was just impassable for any kind of effective search. So for months, the mountains just held their secrets.
Until the spring.
Until the spring thaw. It wasn't until June 1978, so about 4 months later, when the snow finally melted enough to allow access, But the first grim breakthroughs occurred. On June 4th, a group of motorcyclists, just out for a ride, purely by chance, stumbled upon Ted Ware's body.
Okay, where was he in relation to the car?
He was found inside a remote Forest Service trailer, like a small basic ranger's outpost. And it was located about 19 miles walking distance from where the Montego was abandoned.
19 miles. They walked that far. Or he did, at least.
It seems so. Or at least ended up there somehow. But the details of this discovery are, if anything, even more profoundly unsettling than the car. They really raise more questions than answers.
How so?
Ware was found lying on a bed inside the trailer. He was covered in blankets, several layers, suggesting maybe some attempt at comfort or warmth.
Okay, that sounds somewhat logical.
But despite an abundance of stored food in that trailer, enough rations for a week easily. Sea rations, canned goods, other provisions, and heating supplies, like propane tanks for a stove.
Right. Everything you'd need.
Everything you'd need to survive for quite a while. None of it had been used, not a single can opened, not a match struck. None. He had died of starvation and exposure, hypothermia contributing, certainly, but the primary cause was starvation.
He starved to death.
Surrounded by food.
Mere feet from food and fuel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A truly unimaginable scenario. Dying of hunger and cold, literally within arm's reach of a veritable treasure trove of survival necessities.
Okay, let me make sure I understand this clearly. He's inside a shelter. There's food for a week. There's fuel for heat.
Right.
And she starves to death, and none of those resources were even touched.
That's what the report state, yes.
That single detail, it's enough to make anyone's head spin. What on earth could possibly explain such a profound failure to utilize readily available resources for survival? It's almost impossible to comprehend.
It truly does pose a fundamental challenge to any simple explanation. If we think about survival psychology, sure, extreme fear, disorientation, perhaps a profound physical incapacitation could lead to such a state.
Maybe he was too weak.
Possibly too weak eventually. But the fact that nothing was touched suggests something happened before he reached that point. It suggests a more complex scenario than simply being too weak to open a can at the very end. It begs the question, was he physically unable? Was he mentally unwilling? Was he perhaps under some sort of duress or experiencing some delusion that prevented him from accessing them?
Like he didn't realize they were there, or couldn't.
Or perhaps thought he shouldn't for some reason. The lack of any sign of an attempt to light the stove or open the food is just the most bewildering aspect of his discovery.
Okay, so that's Waher. What about the others?
So in the days following Waiter's discovery, as the search intensified in that specific area now, the remains of 3 more of the men were also found.
Okay.
On June 6th, Jack Madruga's body was discovered. He was about 4.5 miles from the abandoned car, somewhat off the main road they would have walked up.
Closer to the car than the trailer, then?
Much closer, yes. Then Bill Sterling's partial remains were found a day later, maybe about a mile further into the woods from Madruga. And then Jack Hewitt's bones were discovered on June 12th, even deeper into the wilderness, roughly 11 miles from the car, sort of in the direction of the trailer, but still miles short of it.
And how did they die?
All 3 of them, Madruga, Sterling, and Hewitt, had died of hypothermia. They succumbed to the elements. Their bodies were scattered across miles of this rough terrain.
So we have one man, Ted Wire, dying of starvation and exposure inside a shelter with untouched food. 3 others dying of hypothermia scattered miles away between the car and the trailer.
Correct.
And then there's the 5th man, Gary Mathias.
Gary Mathias was never found.
Never.
Despite extensive searches, both by authorities initially and later by private investigators hired by his family over the years, Gary Mathias remains missing to this day. His fate is perhaps the most enduring and agonizing piece of this puzzle, especially for his family. Did he succumb to the elements somewhere undiscovered? Did he somehow survive and wander off? Or was he taken? We simply don't know.
Wow. So, to sort of summarize the core enigmas from the official findings, investigators struggled, and I guess still struggle, to explain several critical points.
Absolutely.
First, why were they even in that specific remote location to begin with? It's so far off their route.
Right, what led them up that mountain road?
Second, how did they become separated? Given they were such a close-knit group, why weren't they found together? Or at least closer?
The scattering is strange. Did they separate intentionally? Were they forced apart? Did some try to go for help while others stayed?
And maybe most baffling of all, why weren't those trailer resources used by Ted Wire, leading to his death by starvation? It just doesn't fit.
It's the crux of the impossibility for many.
Yeah.
What does all this mean for understanding what truly happened? It feels like the pieces just don't fit any conventional narrative.
No.
The disjunction between the available resources and Wire's cause of death, the strange scattering of the others, the missing keys, the location itself, it's the primary source of bewilderment. If the men had simply gotten lost, run out of gas maybe, and succumbed to the elements, their deaths would be tragic, yes, but at least understandable within the bounds of survival scenarios we know.
Right. A sad accident.
Exactly. But these specific circumstances, they introduce elements that just defy straightforward logic. And this vacuum of any official, coherent explanation, well, it naturally led to a surge of speculation.
And that's precisely where the internet and popular culture really step in, isn't it? When you have a void of official answers, especially one as profoundly perplexing as this, theories just thrive.
It's almost inevitable, particularly when you have such an incomplete, contradictory set of evidence. Our minds, they crave closure. We want things to make sense. And when a case offers none, we try to create our own narratives to fill that gap.
We try to connect the dots, even if the lines are blurry.
It's human nature, isn't it, to try and make sense of the nonsensical. And in cases like the Yuba County 5, where the known facts are just so bizarre, the mind races to fill in the blanks. This is especially true now in the digital age, where collective speculation can snowball into these widely discussed theories, even if they lack concrete evidence.
Yeah, it becomes its own ecosystem of ideas.
It's fertile ground for what we call the threads of truth.
Right.
People trying to weave a coherent narrative from these disparate, baffling elements.
Okay, so let's dive into some of those key theories that have emerged, both from the sources and just from public discussion over the years. The first one, maybe the simplest to grasp initially, is the accidental misadventure or accidental death theory.
Right. The baseline theory.
The basic idea here is they simply took a wrong turn. Maybe they got confused trying to find a shortcut. Maybe the snow conditions were worse than they realized. They got disoriented, and eventually they felt forced to abandon the car for some reason. Then, tragically, they succumbed to the elements.
It sounds plausible on the surface. A wrong turn happens, getting lost happens.
But
while it offers a straightforward explanation, it struggles immensely to account for the really bizarre circumstances of their deaths. The sources we looked at are pretty clear on this, indicating that this theory is considered highly unlikely by many, including investigators and family.
why so unlikely?
Because it doesn't just involve them leaving a working car with a full tank of gas in the freezing cold. That's weird enough. It's the degree of irrationality involved that's hard to square with just being lost.
Okay.
If they were simply disoriented by snow, why would 5 men as a group not even attempt to use the car for shelter or warmth? I mean, that's survival 101.
Stay with the vehicle.
Stay with the vehicle. Why would none of them, even individually apparently, attempt to try the ignition again or even try to push the vehicle, especially if it was indeed easily pushed out later? This feels like it goes beyond simple confusion into something, well, profoundly unnatural for a survival situation.
And then there's Wire.
And then, of course, there's Ted Wire. His death by starvation, despite having access to ample food and heating supplies right there in the trailer. An accidental death due to exposure or getting lost might explain the deaths of Madruga, Sterling, and Hewitt out in the elements, maybe. But it cannot explain Ware's specific circumstances or the untouched resources. The sheer illogicality of that makes the simple "they got lost" theory fall far short for many people looking at this case.
Yeah, that trailer scene is the real sticking point for the accident theory. It makes it a really tough sell,
Definitely.
which then naturally leads us towards a much darker hypothesis, the foul play or criminal encounters theory. This suggests they didn't just get lost, but they encountered dangerous individuals. Maybe they were forced to flee into the wilderness. Maybe they were direct victims of a crime that started on that road. What evidence, or maybe lack of evidence, supports such a sinister possibility?
Well, this theory gains significant traction precisely because it offers a potential explanation for those strange and inexplicable circumstances that the accident theory can't handle.
It fills the logic gaps.
It attempts to, yes. The fact that the car keys were missing, despite The vehicle being otherwise functional and unlocked is a major flag for many. It strongly suggests someone else took them, perhaps to prevent escape, or maybe they were forced to discard them during a confrontation.
Okay, that makes sense in a foul play scenario.
Also, the family's persistent belief, particularly Matthias's family, that the case was mishandled by the police, lends some weight to this idea, or at least shows their dissatisfaction with the accident conclusion. They felt authorities didn't sufficiently pursue a criminal angle from the start.
What kind of criminal encounters are proposed?
Various scenarios have been floated. Maybe a carjacking that went terribly wrong. Maybe they witnessed something they shouldn't have up there on that remote road. Maybe they had an encounter with a disgruntled local or someone unstable who forced them out of the car and into the woods at gunpoint, perhaps. Or maybe they were victims of just a random, senseless act of violence. It provides a motive, however speculative, for why they might have left a seemingly safe car and walked miles into the freezing wilderness. Fear could make you do irrational things.
True. But what's the counter-argument? What's missing?
The significant gap here is a complete lack of concrete physical evidence. There were no reported signs of a struggle at the car, no bullet casings found, no blood evidence suggesting violence right there. And of course, the discovery of Gary Matthias's body, or any remains linked to a perpetrator, is still missing. Without that kind of corroborating evidence, foul play remains impossible to prove.
So it explains the weirdness, but lacks proof.
Exactly. Yet it's often considered the most plausible explanation in some interpretations, precisely because it addresses the inconsistencies, the missing keys, the abandoned car. Weir's situation may be being influenced by fear or threat that other theories just can't seem to reconcile.
Okay. Then there's another theory, one that's more psychologically driven, and it often focuses on Gary Matthias, given his background. This is the Gary Matthias's role, or maybe a shrewd psychosis theory.
Right. This one comes up a lot because of his diagnosis.
The speculation here is that Matthias, given his history of schizophrenia, might have experienced an episode, maybe became paranoid or delusional, and somehow led the group off course into the forest. Or perhaps they experienced some kind of shared psychotic episode where their collective judgment just became severely impaired, leading to all these irrational actions.
It's a tempting narrative, in a way, because it attempts to assign a seemingly simple psychological explanation to incredibly bizarre behavior. Shared psychosis, or folie à deux, as it's technically known, is a real, although very rare, psychiatric phenomenon where delusional beliefs can sometimes be transmitted from one individual to others, usually in a very close, often isolated relationship.
So it's theoretically possible.
Theoretically, in the abstract sense of the phenomenon existing. However, the sources we reviewed are quite explicit that this specific theory, as applied to the Yuba County Five, is not supported by any of their actions after their disappearance. And importantly, it has been rejected by their family.
Why not supported by their actions?
Well, there's nothing concrete in the evidence found, the state of the bodies, the trailer scene, the scattered locations that directly points to Matthias leaving them under specific delusion, or indicates a group-wide psychotic break dictating those specific strange actions. It's pure speculation based largely on his diagnosis.
And the families reject it.
Strongly. While individual psychological states can certainly influence behavior, especially under extreme stress, it's crucial, I think, to differentiate between a speculative hypothesis and actual factual support. There's just no concrete evidence to suggest Matthias led them off course due to his condition or that a collective delusion suddenly occurred that night. Furthermore, the families have consistently stated that Matthias's condition, while known, never manifested in a way that would put others in danger or lead them on some bizarre, inexplicable path like this. They felt he was managing it.
So it risks becoming an easy answer that isn't based on much.
Exactly. It risks oversimplifying a complex tragedy with a convenient but ultimately unsubstantiated explanation that potentially stigmatizes mental illness without proper grounding in the facts of the case.
Okay, so beyond human actions, whether malicious or psychological, we absolutely have to consider the pure environmental factors.
Undeniably.
The sheer cold up there, the deep snow, the disorientation that quickly sets in with hypothermia. That must have influenced their decision-making, right? Leading to seemingly irrational choices. Nature itself is a powerful force.
Absolutely. The environmental factors are undeniable contributors to the tragic outcome, regardless of what initially caused their predicament. Once they were out of that car, the environment was lethal.
Mhm.
The extreme cold, the intense stress of being lost, possibly frightened, in a snow-covered wilderness. It can severely impair judgment and cognitive function. We know this happens
Thinking clearly goes out the window.
completely.
Yeah.
People suffering from severe hypothermia can experience profound confusion, disorientation, memory loss, and even that phenomenon known as paradoxical undressing.
Right, I've heard of that. Where people feel hot even though they're freezing.
Exactly. The body, in this desperate, often fatal attempt to regulate temperature, sends warm blood rushing to the extremities. This creates a sudden sensation of intense overheating, even as the core body temperature is plummeting dangerously low. And tragically, this can lead victims to remove their clothing, thinking they need to cool down, which of course only accelerates their demise.
So that could explain why some might have been found not fully clothed, even in the snow.
It could be a factor, yes. So while the environment might not be the sole explanation for why they left the car initially, or why Weyer ignored the trailer's resources, it's certainly a major contributing factor to the irrational choices observed in almost any scenario of their deaths once they were exposed. It helps explain how people under extreme duress might make choices that seem utterly illogical to an outside observer looking back with the clarity of hindsight.
It adds another layer of tragic complexity. Now, one of the most striking things about this case, and it's mentioned explicitly in the source material we looked at, is how it's often called America's own Dyatlov Pass mystery.
Yes, that comparison comes up frequently.
For those maybe unfamiliar, Dyatlov Pass was that truly baffling incident in the Ural Mountains back in the Soviet Union in 1959. 9 experienced hikers died under extremely mysterious, bizarre circumstances. It's one of the most famous unsolved mysteries in the world.
And the comparison to the Yuba County 5 is quite insightful, I think. It's a parallel that really resonates deeply with people who try to follow these threads of truth in complex mysteries.
What are the key parallels?
Well, both cases involve incredibly strange circumstances surrounding the deaths. Both feature unexplainable decisions apparently made by the victims themselves, and both leave behind an incomplete, confusing evidence trail that just frustrates any simple conclusion.
Right, and Dyatlov, you had hikers cutting their way out of their tent from the inside in sub-zero temperatures.
Some found barefoot or without proper clothing, miles from the tent.
And some had these inexplicable internal injuries, like massive chest trauma, but with no external signs of a fight or fall. Just bizarre.
Exactly. And the Yuba County 5 shares these kinds of unsettling parallels. You have the abandonment of a working vehicle in a remote, freezing environment. You have the untouched food and fuel in Ted Wayer's trailer. That's a huge one. You have the missing keys, the scattered bodies found in unusual conditions miles apart.
Both seem to challenge basic survival instincts.
Precisely. Both events seem to challenge the very instincts of survival, leaving behind this profound sense of unanswered questions and a legacy of intense speculation. They tap into a really primal human fear. I think the fear of the unknown, the inexplicable, the idea that something beyond our comprehension could be at play in the world.
Yeah.
The sheer absurdity and tragedy of both events have ensured they remain etched in public consciousness decades later.
Okay, so given all we know, all these theories, the perplexing details, the comparisons, which theories in your analysis seem to hold the most weight? And why do others ultimately fall short? It really feels like no single explanation fully satisfies all the bizarre elements, does it? We're left with this patchwork of possibility.
You're absolutely right. No single theory perfectly explains everything. And honestly, that's precisely what makes this case so enduringly compelling and frustrating. When we try to synthesize the information, the foul play theory, well, while it remains unproven due to lack of hard evidence.
Right, no smoking gun.
No smoking gun. But it does align most closely with accounting for the strange and inexplicable circumstances of the findings. And it resonates with the family's persistent concerns about how the investigation was handled early on.
It explains the anomalies better.
It provides a potential reason for the anomalies. The missing keys, the fact the car was abandoned while still functional, the scattered bodies. These things make more sense if you introduce an external threat or force compelling their actions. If they were simply disoriented by snow, why wasn't the car used as shelter? Why were the keys gone? The very anomalies are what fuel this theory.
But the lack of proof is the big hurdle.
It's the massive hurdle. The exact mechanism of such a crime remains completely unknown, leaving a significant gap in the narrative. Conversely, the sheer irrationality we talked about, leaving a safe car, neglecting readily available resources like food and heat, that profoundly challenges the simple accidental misadventure explanation.
It just doesn't compute behaviorally.
Exactly. If they were merely lost or disoriented, why such a profound disregard for basic fundamental survival needs? These anomalies ensure that a purely accidental narrative struggles to stand on its own. It's the presence of all this contradictory evidence that really highlights the difficulty in finding a single, satisfying answer. We're pulled in different directions by the facts themselves.
So it's really not just one factor at play then. It's more likely a tragic convergence of multiple factors, like an interplay of the environment, human psychology under extreme duress, and perhaps maybe even third-party actions, all colliding somehow to create this deeply complex, tragic equation. How do you see those elements interacting?
I think that's precisely it. This case is a stark, tragic example of how multiple elements can converge in the worst possible way, creating a mystery that defies easy categorization. First, the environment itself. It was undeniably lethal once the men left the relative safety of that vehicle.
No question.
The harsh, snowy conditions, the freezing temperatures that would rapidly lead to hypothermia, disorientation, that would certainly affect their ability to think clearly, to make rational decisions.
Then you add the human element.
Then we have human psychology, disorientation, hypothermia, extreme stress, panic, or even an external threat, like the presence or perceived presence of another hostile party. Any of those could have profoundly altered their decision-making processes. It could have led them to make choices that seem utterly illogical to us now looking back.
And the specific makeup of the group might factor in.
Potentially. The sources mention the men's mild intellectual disabilities. Now, again, emphasizing this is absolutely not a cause of the tragedy, but it is a factor that, in a sudden crisis, could have impacted their ability to navigate an unfamiliar, terrifying situation effectively. It might have exacerbated confusion or perhaps made them more vulnerable to suggestion or paralyzed by fear.
They were a close group too.
Very close. They relied on each other. A breakdown in that group dynamic, perhaps under extreme stress or because of an outside force disrupting them, could have had catastrophic results. Maybe they didn't agree on what to do. Maybe some panicked. We don't know.
And then there's that lingering possibility.
And finally, yes, the lingering suspicion of possible third-party actions just cannot be easily dismissed. The missing keys, the state of the car, the scattered bodies, they continue to fuel suspicions of external involvement. Even if direct evidence of a criminal act is lacking, these factors strongly suggest that their initial decision to leave the car wasn't purely voluntary or just a simple navigational error gone wrong.
Something pushed them.
Something seems to have pushed them, yes. It's the confluence, the terrible intersection of all these elements, environment, psychology, group dynamics, and the possibility of foul play that makes the Yuba County 5 case so enduringly perplexing. It leaves us constantly wondering how these different variables twisted together into such a uniquely devastating outcome.
That paints such a vivid, almost nightmarish picture. A scenario where just everything went catastrophically wrong, possibly initiated or pushed by some unknown force or factor. But why does this particular story stick with us so strongly decades later? Why has it become, as the source material describes it, a national legend rather than just another tragic cold case fading into history? What is it about this specific set of circumstances that continues to capture our collective imagination?
I think it resonates for several really powerful reasons that tap into very fundamental human needs and fears. Firstly, there's simply the power of an unsolved case. It's undeniable.
We hate loose ends.
We absolutely hate loose ends. Our minds crave closure. We want to understand, to put the pieces together neatly, to resolve the narrative tension. The Yuba County 5 case offers none of that. Zero closure.
Just questions.
Just questions. It's an incomplete puzzle, a mystery that, by its very nature, invites continuous speculation, generation after generation. This lack of resolution transforms it into a national legend, I think, because it forces us to confront the limits of our own understanding and the unsettling idea that some truths might just forever remain hidden. It's this haunting question mark in the fabric of American folklore, an enduring symbol of the unknown.
And beyond the intellectual puzzle, the sheer mystery of it, there's a deeply human element too, isn't there? You mentioned the families earlier. Their tireless fight adds such a profound layer of emotional depth.
Absolutely. The family's tireless fight to find answers resonates so deeply with all of us. This is quite literally a parent's worst nightmare. The sudden disappearance of a child, the agonizing wait for news, and then the subsequent discovery of unimaginable, inexplicable circumstances surrounding their death.
And still no answers for Gary's family.
And still no answers at all for Gary Mathias's family. Their relentless fight, sometimes against a system they believed failed them, their enduring hope against hope, and their profound ongoing pain. It makes this tragedy profoundly impactful on a human level. It's a story not just about a mystery, but about the deep and lasting human cost of an unsolved disappearance. Their love and determination to seek justice, or at least truth, even decades later, adds immense emotional weight to the narrative. It reminds us constantly that these were real lives, real people with loved ones left behind, desperately seeking answers that had never fully come.
And of course, in our modern world, the role of the media and the internet can't be understated, can it? In keeping these kinds of cases alive, ensuring they aren't just forgotten in some dusty old case file somewhere.
That's absolutely right. The digital age has completely ensured the Yuba County 5 case remains active in the public consciousness. You have online forums, dedicated true crime communities, podcasts like this one, documentaries, endless social media discussions. They've all kept the case alive.
Constantly re-examining,
allowing new theories, some plausible, some perhaps less so, and new discussions to emerge continually. It fosters this continuous interest and re-examination. It means that while the official investigation might have stalled decades ago, the collective human desire for answers continues to push for new perspectives, new possibilities, maybe even new overlooked clues. This constant re-engagement, even when significant new evidence is rare, keeps the mystery's threads of truth tangled but always visible. It's always inviting new generations to pore over the perplexing details and try to make sense of it.
Which brings us right back to those threads of truth that seem to define this case so well. It's the conflicting evidence, isn't it? A seemingly simple disappearance on one hand versus a potentially complex homicide, or maybe something even stranger on the other. That inherent conflict creates such a compelling, enduring mystery. It just invites ongoing speculation and exploration. And the chilling reality, the possibility, maybe even probability, that the ultimate truth may be forever lost. That just adds to its haunting quality. It's a tragedy that refuses to simply fade away quietly into history.
It's true, that tension, that pull between a potentially simple, albeit tragic, accident and the very real possibility of a complex, perhaps sinister, event is exactly what makes this case so captivating, so sticky. We are presented with details that suggest one thing they got lost, they froze, but then immediately contradicted by other, equally baffling facts: the car, the keys, the trailer. This inherent contradiction, this tangled web, ensures the Yuba County 5 will remain a subject of fascination. It may be a powerful meditation on the limits of our knowledge when faced with the raw, inexplicable nature of certain human tragedies. The silence of those mountains, it continues to hold its secrets, doesn't it? But the questions, they remain as loud as ever.
The disappearance of the Yuba County 5 remains such a haunting question mark in the annals of unsolved mysteries. 5 lives just irrevocably altered. A community left with an enduring, sad legend. And for all of us, I think, a lingering sense of profound unease about what really happened on that cold California night back in 1978.
Was it a random abduction? A premeditated crime we can't fathom? Or somehow, against all odds, an accidental death cloaked in an almost impossible series of decisions? The threads of truth are tangled, maybe permanently, and the silence of the mountains, well, it continues to hold its secrets.
As you listening reflect on this, what specific detail or theory about this case stands out most to you? What feels like the loose thread you'd want to pull?
Next time on Threads of Truth, we head down under to Australia to explore the baffling disappearance of Marion Barter, a woman who seemed to just vanish into thin air after starting what looked like a brand new life.